My fiancé asked for a break. I found out he was already living with someone else. He asked for a break on a Tuesday night, standing in our kitchen with his phone face down on the counter and his jacket still on, like he couldn't wait to leave. He said he felt lost, that he needed space to figure himself out, that it wasn't about anyone else, and that this was just a pause, not an ending. I remember nodding while my chest felt hollow, telling myself that couples survived breaks all the time, that love sometimes needed air. He kissed my forehead, promised he wasn't going anywhere, and walked out with a duffel bag like it was temporary. That night I slept on my side of the bed, clutching his pillow because it still smelled like his cologne. I replayed every conversation from the last year, searching for signs I might have missed. We were engaged. We had a date set. Deposits paid. A guest list drafted. A future that had names and plans and inside jokes. Breaks were for dating couples, not for people who had already promised forever. The first red flag came the next morning when I realized he hadn't texted to check if I was okay. Not even a "did you sleep?" message. I told myself he was giving me space, respecting the break he asked for. I spent the day cleaning compulsively, as if organizing drawers could organize my thoughts. I folded his clothes and put them back neatly, convinced he'd be back in a week or two, grateful, clearer, ready to commit again. On day 2, I noticed his location was turned off. We had shared locations for years, mostly for safety, mostly because it felt intimate in a harmless way. I didn't confront him. I didn't want to be the clingy fiancé who couldn't respect boundaries. Instead, I made soup from scratch and froze portions labeled with his name, because apparently denial makes you domestic. The truth found me on day 3, not through snooping, but through coincidence so cruel it felt scripted. I ran into his coworker at the grocery store, someone I'd met a dozen times at work events, someone who knew us as a unit. She froze when she saw me, eyes flicking to my ring like it was a ghost. We exchanged awkward pleasantries until she finally said, "I thought you were moving this week." I laughed, because laughter sometimes comes out when your brain short-circuits. I told her I wasn't moving anywhere. She went pale. She stammered, apologized, and tried to backtrack, but the damage was already done. I pressed gently, pretending this was casual curiosity instead of a free fall. She told me he'd mentioned moving into a new place closer to work. She told me he'd said we when talking about furniture. She told me she'd seen him carrying boxes into an apartment over the weekend. I thanked her for the information like she'd just recommended a restaurant, then walked out of the store without buying anything. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel until my hands went numb. Living with someone else. Already. While I was labeling soup containers and crying into his pillow. While he was telling me this was just a break. I drove to the address she mentioned without fully deciding to. My body seemed to know before my brain did. The building was modern, expensive, the kind of place we'd talked about moving into someday. I parked across the street and waited, heart pounding so loudly I thought it might give me away. Then I saw him. He walked out of the building wearing the hoodie I bought him for his birthday, laughing at something on his phone. A woman followed him, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket like she belonged there. She handed him a coffee mug. They kissed, not a quick, guilty peck, but the comfortable kiss of people who had done this many times before. I didn't confront them. I couldn't move. I watched them get into the same car he'd driven to my apartment a week earlier, the car that still had my hair ties in the cup holder. When they drove away, I finally screamed, a sound so raw it surprised me. I called him. Straight to voicemail. I texted him one sentence. "Are you living with someone else?" He replied an hour later. 1 hour. As if he needed time to decide how much truth to give me. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said things had happened fast. He said he didn't plan for it to go this way. He said he was going to tell me when the time was right. I asked him how long. He didn't answer. I asked him when he met her. He said it didn't matter. That was when something inside me snapped cleanly, like a bone breaking without pain at first. I demanded to see him in person. He agreed, sounding annoyed, like I was inconveniencing him. We met at a park halfway between our places. He showed up late. He didn't hug me. He didn't apologize. He said he cared about me but wasn't in love anymore, and that asking for a break was his way of letting me down gently. I told him gently would have been honesty. He shrugged. He said he didn't want to hurt me. He said he'd been unhappy for a while. He said the other woman understood him in ways I didn't. He said a lot of things people say when they want to justify replacing someone instead of leaving them cleanly. I asked him if he ever planned on coming back. He looked at me like the answer was obvious. That was the moment I realized the break was never for him to think. It was for me to wait. To stay loyal. To keep the door open while he tested a new life. I went home and took off my ring. I placed it on the table and stared at it for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't expected. I packed his remaining things into boxes, methodically, calmly, like I was performing surgery on my own life. I didn't cry until I found a note he'd written months earlier, talking about our future kids and the house we'd grow old in. I blocked him that night. The days that followed were a blur of grief and rage and humiliation. I replayed conversations, wondering if everyone else had known before I did. I felt stupid for trusting him, for believing in the version of him that promised permanence. I felt embarrassed telling people the wedding was off, even though I'd done nothing wrong. Then the messages started. He emailed me, saying he missed me. He said the new relationship was complicated. He said he felt guilty. He said maybe they'd moved too fast. I didn't respond. He messaged my friends, asking how I was. He liked old photos of us on social media, as if nostalgia could rewrite betrayal. The other woman viewed my stories obsessively. I could feel their presence like a shadow, hovering at the edge of my healing. Weeks later, he showed up at my door unannounced. He looked thinner. Regretful. He said moving in with her had been a mistake. He said he realized what he'd lost. He said he wanted to talk. I stood there, heart racing, and felt something unexpected, clarity. I told him he didn't lose me when he moved out. He lost me when he lied. When he asked for a break instead of telling the truth. When he let me believe we were still us while he built a life with someone else. I closed the door. The healing wasn't fast. It wasn't graceful. Some nights I still woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Some days I wondered if I'd ever trust again. But slowly, painfully, I started choosing myself in small ways. Rearranging furniture. Changing routines. Learning who I was without waiting for someone to come back. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that he and the woman had broken up. Apparently, trust issues. Apparently, it turned out that someone who lies to start a relationship doesn't suddenly become honest inside one. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Now, when I think about that night in the kitchen, about the way he said break instead of goodbye, I understand it for what it was. A way to soften his landing while letting me fall. A way to keep me as an option while he explored another life. I was never a pause button. I was a person. And losing him didn't break me, believing his lie almost did.